7 o'clock, good morning, Wednesday morning, and we're in the last few hours of Jesus' life as we do 7 a.m. Bible time today, and it's all about to climax. We're on the run up to Good Friday at our church, Village Church. I'm speaking on the crucifixion from the last bit of Matthew 27 online, 9:30 Friday morning, villagechurch.sydney. I hope you can join us for that. Today, I want you to look with me at a particular news event, a court hearing. And as we look at this court hearing, I want you to read yourself into this event and ask yourself, what would I have done? Who would I have been in this situation? As we look at the different characters in this event, try to work out, who do you identify with most strongly? Whose shoes will you walk in? Who is me here? Do you resonate with the actions of the Jewish leaders and the crowd, or do you resonate with the actions of the Roman Governor Pilate, or do you resonate with the criminal Barabbas? Now, the trial starts and it's pretty straightforward as Pilate, the governor, establishes that Jesus is king. In 11, Jesus stood before the governor. This is chapter 27, verse 11. Jesus stood before the governor. "Are you the king of the Jews?" The governor asked him. Now, it's a secular court. We've previously seen Jesus on trial by the Jewish religious court, but this is the court that is able to pronounce the death penalty on Jesus. And Jesus' response comes in chapter 27, verse 11. Jesus says, "You have said it." Now, as the trial continues, Pilate ends up releasing the guilty prisoner, Barabbas, and condemning Jesus to death. Let me read to you from verse 15 of chapter 27. "At the festival, the governor's custom was to release to the crowd a prisoner that they wanted. Now, at that time, a notorious prisoner called Barabbas. So when they gathered together, Pilate said to them, 'Who is it you want me to release for you, Barabbas or Jesus, who's called the Christ? Who shall he have executed, the criminal or the one called Christ, the one called King?'" Now, verse 18. "He knew it was because of envy that they'd handed him over." Now, down to 20. "The chief priests and the elders persuaded the crowds to ask for Barabbas and to execute Jesus. The governor asked them, 'Which of the two do you want me to release for you?' 'Barabbas, Barabbas,' they answered." Now, Barabbas and Jesus were both popular. The Roman governor, Pilate, wished to release Jesus and execute Barabbas. The Jewish leaders wished to release Barabbas and to execute Jesus. The people end up siding with their spiritual leaders and against their government leader. Barabbas had done the wrong thing. Barabbas was a murderous, nationalistic guerrilla leader. In fact, the next scene, we'll see Jesus hung up on the cross between two insurrectionist guerrilla leaders, and I think you can be pretty sure that the cross that Jesus actually hung on was supposed to be the cross that Barabbas was going to hang on. Now, what about Jesus then, if Barabbas is to go free? Sentence 22. Pilate said, "What shall I do then with Jesus, who's called the Christ?" They all answered, "Crucify him, crucify him." Then 23, he said, "Why? What has he done wrong?" And it's really quite startling, the intensity of the antagonism to Jesus here. They are just so blatantly opposed. They want him executed. They really hate him. They've openly rejected Jesus. And there are people like those first century Jews in our community today, even today, who have that sort of intense reaction, hatred of Jesus. I don't know if it's you or a friend of yours who identifies with those first century Jews. I don't mean racially. But as you hear this account, do you put yourself in the shoes of these first century Jews? Would you have reacted like they reacted? Have you, now or in the past, had that intense, antagonistic, angry reaction to Jesus? I was at a Christian meeting and the speaker was speaking, I thought, clearly and well and winsomely of Jesus, and I was talking to somebody afterwards who said, that speaker, he was smug, he was arrogant, how dare he? And they were really angry at the way the speaker had been describing Jesus. And I thought back over it and the way the speaker had handled himself, I thought it was a good address. I think the person in the audience was actually shooting the messenger because he didn't like the message. I think that man in his heart was actually walking in the footsteps of these first century Jews. He was actually actively, antagonistically angry with Jesus. I talked to people who knew him and they said, well, he's been angry with Jesus for years. And And really in that conversation, I had just copped the brunt of his anger as it bubbled over in the conversation that day. Here, they kept shouting, crucify him, all the more. And verse 24, when Pilate saw that he was getting nowhere, but that a riot was starting, instead, he took some water, washed his hands in front of the crowd and said, I'm innocent of this man's blood. See to it yourselves. Pilate didn't think that Jesus had done anything deserving death. Pilate thought that Jesus was innocent, publicly washes his hands. Not my responsibility. I'm clean here. Perhaps like Lady Macbeth, he's trying to wash his guilt away. What was the people's response? Verse 25, the people answered, his blood be on us and on our children. Then, 26, he released Barabbas to them, and after having Jesus flogged, handed him over to be crucified. Now, who are you at the trial of Jesus? I wonder if you identify with Pilate. I mean, you're not the antagonistic. In fact, deep down, like Pilate, it even rings true for you that Jesus is the king, that Jesus was innocent. It's just that, like Pilate, when push came to shove, you didn't act like that was the case. See, when people have actively opposed and attacked Jesus in your office or at coffee time with friends, and there have been times you haven't stood up for Jesus. I mean, we've had convictions that Jesus deep down is the king, but we haven't nailed our colours to the wall. To be honest, in the push and shove, our spine or our character has not been strong enough to stand up for Jesus. And we just kept pushing away, pushing to the back of our mind that truth that Jesus is the innocent king dying in the place of the guilty. And our rejection of Jesus, it's been a passive rejection like Pilate. But friend, I need to say that in the end, if you identify with Pilate as kind of a passive rejecter of Jesus, then your rejection of Jesus is every bit as serious as the Jewish who have that active antagonistic rejection of Jesus. A few years ago, I spoke on this chapter of the Bible at a meeting of lawyers in the city. And I talked about standing in the shoes of the Jewish leaders or standing in the shoes of Pilate. And well, here's the most controversial point. Well, it was controversial for them. I was hoping to persuade them to stand in the shoes of the criminal Barabbas. Barabbas deserved to die. Barabbas deserved punishment. Barabbas was in the wrong before God. Barabbas had rejected God. Barabbas deserved hell. We deserved hell. We deserve punishment. We're in the wrong before God. We deserve the judgment. And as Barabbas went free from death row, so we, if we identify with Barabbas, we can go free from the death row that we're on. And I was saying to these lawyers, will you switch identification? Will you start identifying not primarily as a Jew, an active rejecter of Jesus, or Pilate, a passive rejecter of Jesus, but will you from now on primarily identify with Barabbas as a guilty one who now goes free? And I remember flicking through the response cards at the end of the meeting and this lawyer people, and I remember one card particularly because it jumped out at me, large, angry, bold, firm print, kind of shouting at me. He'd written, I am not Barabbas. And I remember how sad I felt at his choice. For in the end, we are all the Jewish leaders or Pilate, whether we like it or not. We stand in their shoes as rejectors of Jesus. Where we have a choice is, will we stand in Barabbas's shoes or not? We are guilty. Will we take advantage of this moment? Will we have Jesus stand in our place? Do you want to make that step to stop rejecting Jesus, whether it's passive or active? To turn to God in prayer? This is what you'd pray. Pray with me. Dear God, I'm sorry for my rejection of you. I do deserve punishment. Thank you that Jesus died for me. I want to identify with Barabbas. Help me to treat Jesus as my King. Amen.